Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening a file that I honestly didn't expect to be this fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a departure for us.
It really is, because usually we look at these massive, earth-shaking events, like geopolitics or tech revolutions, ancient history, things like that.
The big picture stuff.
Exactly. But today we're zooming in on a very specific, somewhat obscure corner of pop culture history.
But it's a corner that tells a much bigger story than you might think at first glance.
I completely agree. So we are looking at the career of a professional wrestler, a man named David Everett Ferrier.
Right.
Now, if I just say that name to you, the listener, probably 99% of you are just going to shrug.
It doesn't exactly scream stadium-filling superstar.
No, not at all. It sounds like, I don't know, an accountant.
Yeah.
Or maybe a guy who runs a local hardware store.
Which is funny because, as we'll find out later, he actually did end up doing something quite similar to that.
He did. But to the wrestling world, he is known by a much more colorful, slightly sleazier name.
Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey.
The Gigolo. And right there, that is where the hook is for me. Because when you hear the word gigolo in the context of 1990s professional wrestling, you expect a very specific look.
You expect the bodybuilder. The ravishing Rick Rude archetype.
Right, exactly. A Fabio type, someone with the chiseled abs, the flowing hair, the baby oil, just the whole package.
But Jimmy Del Rey was the complete opposite of that expectation.
Completely. The source material we're using today, which is built on his biographical records and match histories, it's very polite about it, but it's honest. It describes him as having a, quote, slightly pudgy midsection.
Yeah, he was not ripped. He looked like a regular guy who maybe enjoyed a beer or two on the weekends.
He looked like someone's uncle, but,
Yeah.
And this is the crazy part, he moved like a cat.
That really is the paradox we're exploring today, the unlikely agile athlete.
This is a guy who would go out to the ring, do this ridiculous, taunting dance where he would literally shake his belly at the audience.
The infamous jiggle.
Oh, jiggle, right. He'd shake it to make them mad, and then the bell would ring, and he would suddenly perform these flawless moonsaults.
And technical holds that rivaled the absolute best cruiserweights in the world at that time.
It's just a fascinating contradiction. So our mission today, as we dig into these sources, isn't just to rattle off a list of his matches.
No, we want to understand the journey of a definitive worker in the 1990s wrestling scene.
We're going to track his path from the old-school territories, straight through the neon-lit WWF, into the grimy bingo halls of ECW, and finally to the high-flying cruiserweight division of WCW.
He really was a travelogue of the entire industry during its most pivotal decade. He hit every single major stop on the map.
And at every stop, he managed to collect championships and unique stories. He was a winner, even if he looked like your neighbor.
So we have this massive stack of sources here. Biographical data, championship histories, personal life records. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning.
Let's do it. Section 1. The early days and the identity crisis. The year is 1985.
1985. So to set the scene for you, the wrestling business is just starting to undergo this massive, seismic change.
Hulk Hogan won the WWF title in 1984, right?
Exactly. The WWF is going national, expanding aggressively. But the old system, the territory system, where you learned your trade by driving 300 miles a night for practically no money, that was still very much alive.
And that gritty territory system is exactly where David Ferrier starts his journey.
He was trained by a man who went by the name the Mighty Yankee.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. The Mighty Yankee. That is a wrestling name if I've ever heard one.
Doesn't it sound like a Golden Age comic book character?
It really does, like someone who fights Captain America.
But you have to remember, training in those days was brutal. It wasn't about sports entertainment yet. There were no foam pits or soft crash mats.
It was about survival.
It was a trade school. It was about respect, grueling stretching, learning legitimate submission holds, and most importantly, learning how to protect yourself and your opponent in the ring.
So Ferrier graduates from the Mighty Yankees old school training, and he needs a name. He needs a persona to step out into the world. And what does he choose? Jimmy Richland.
Jimmy Richland.
I just have to laugh at that because it's so incredibly normal. It sounds like the name of a guy who sells life insurance in the suburbs.
The source material actually points out that funny little detail. The name was so completely unassuming that most fans actually thought it was his real legal name.
He didn't come out as the Destroyer or the Galactic Warrior or anything flashy.
No, he was just Jimmy.
I think it signals something really interesting about his mindset right out of the gate. He wasn't trying to get by on a wild gimmick or a crazy costume. He was essentially saying, I am a wrestler, watch my technique.
That's spot on. He was a mechanic in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of wrestling, especially as we get into the late 80s, is that you have to evolve. You have to catch the promoter's eye and the crowd's eye.
So he starts moving around the territories. He goes down to Florida, championship wrestling from Florida.
Which was a massive hotbed at the time. This is the territory where Dusty Rhodes and all these heavy hitters had been drawing huge crowds for years.
And here we see his first real identity crisis. He changes his name to Jomo Kenya.
A very specific and, as it turns out, very short-lived pivot.
It feels like such a drastic, jarring shift from Jimmy Richland, but it clearly didn't stick, so he pivots again. And this time, he chooses a name that carries some serious industry weight. He becomes Jimmy Backlund.
Now that is a classic wrestling trope right there. For you listening who might not be deep into wrestling history, Bob Backlund was one of the longest-reigning WWF champions ever.
The ultimate all-American boy.
Right, the amateur wrestler, the clean-cut technical wizard.
So by calling himself Jimmy Backlund, was Ferrier implying some sort of biological relation to Bob?
The sources don't say he explicitly went on TV and lied, saying Bob is my cousin, but the implication is the entire point.
It's bland association.
Exactly. If a fan sees the name Backlund on the event poster, they immediately assume this guy is a technical mastermind. They assume he's a good guy. It's a shortcut to establishing credibility.
And looking at the record, it actually worked. He started finding real success in the tag team ranks under that name.
He formed a team called the Playboys with a wrestler named Brett Sawyer. And by July 1st, 1989, they captured the FCW Tag Team Championship.
Now, the source specifically notes that they were awarded the vacant titles. Does that kind of wording diminish the accomplishment at all?
Not in the context of professional wrestling. In a scripted business, if the promoter simply decides that you are the team who should hold the belts when the previous champions leave, that means they view you as top guys. You are the investment.
They trust you to carry the brand.
Right. So they held those belts through the summer of '89, but then on August 22, they lose them. And they lose them to a team that I think just about everyone remembers.
The Nasty Boys.
Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags.
Let's talk about an absolute style clash. You've got the Playboys, who are presumably this technical, maybe slightly pretty boy team.
Or at least trying to be.
Right. And then you have the Nasty Boys, who were just straight up brawlers. Mullets, trench coats, stiff punches, hitting people with garbage cans.
But that's the perfect wrestling dynamic. The
Yeah.
pristine technician versus the chaotic brawler.
And the fact that Del Rey, or Jimmy Backlund at this point, was working top of the card programs with the Nasty Boys in 1989 really shows his level.
Because the Nasty Boys were literally on their way to the WWF to become massive global stars. And Del Rey was right there in the ring with them, facilitating their rise and matching their energy.
But to truly become a master of the wrestling craft back then, you couldn't just stay in Florida. You had to get international experience. You had to go to Japan.
Ah, the Japan chapter. It's almost like a mandatory semester abroad for any truly great technical wrestler.
Yeah.
You look at guys like Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, they all did it.
It's a rite of passage. So our sources show Del Rey went to Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, or FMW, and he worked there from 1989 to 1991.
Yes.
Now, I know a little bit about FMW. When I hear that acronym, I think of exploding barbed wire death matches. I think of copious amounts of blood and extreme physical danger.
And you aren't wrong at all. FMW was absolutely the pioneer of that hardcore deathmatch style. But, and this is a crucial point for context, a promoter can't just run 2 straight hours of explosions.
The crowd would get numb to it.
Exactly. You need variety on the card.
Yeah.
So FMW had this junior heavyweight division that was incredibly fast-paced and athletic to balance out the gore.
So Del Rey was brought in to be the palate cleanser.
In a way, yes.
Hmm?
He was there to provide the high-level athletic wrestling action.
Yeah.
And he was highly successful at it. He actually held the AWA World Light Heavyweight Championship while he was in FMW.
Which proves he could hang with that Japanese style.
The strong style, yes.
Can you just briefly explain strong style for the listener who might not be familiar with that specific term?
Sure. In Japan, professional wrestling is presented much more like a legitimate combat sport. The hits are tangibly harder. They actually make solid contact with their strikes. The submission holds are cinched in much tighter.
It's less theatrical and more physical.
Right. So if you could survive a multi-week tour in Japan and actually get invited back by the promoter, It means you are genuinely tough and highly precise.
Okay.
You aren't just an actor, you're a fighter.
And the records show he also worked for Wing in 1992, which was another Japanese promotion. So he's really racking up the frequent flyer miles here. He's becoming this worldly, seasoned veteran.
And all that hard work finally pays off when the big machine comes calling. The World Wrestling Federation.
He gets a look from them, a tryout. The date is November 29, 1991.
But we should clarify, this wasn't Madison Square Garden. This wasn't WrestleMania.
No, the source notes this was a house show and an untelevised live event. And interestingly, he goes all the way back to the name Jimmy Richland for this match.
Going right back to basics. And do you see who he wrestled?
He wrestled Skinner.
The alligator man from the Everglades.
I used to love Skinner. He would come out to the ring with that real alligator claw and just aggressively chew tobacco.
And underneath that wild gimmick was Steve Kern, who was an absolute legend in Florida wrestling. Now, Del Rey lost that match to Skinner.
But in the wrestling business, a loss isn't always a failure, right?
Not at all. It was a tryout match. He went out there to show the WWF agents in the back, look, I can get in the ring with a respected veteran like Skinner, have a solid, safe match, and do exactly what I am told to do.
He passed the test from a technical standpoint, but he didn't secure a full-time contract right then and there. It seems like he was missing something. He needed the right vehicle to get him to the next level.
Which perfectly transitions us into Section 2 of our deep dive, the Smoky Mountain Wrestling era and the actual birth of the Gigolo.
The year is 1993. The location is Knoxville, Tennessee, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, or SMW, which was run by the legendary Jim Cornette.
Jim Cornette, a highly polarizing figure in wrestling history, to say the very least, but an absolute undisputed genius when it came to booking tag team wrestling.
He loved that traditional, old-school, Southern tag team style. And his top attraction, his big moneymakers in SMW, was a team called the Heavenly Bodies.
Now, originally, that team consisted of Tom Prichard and Stan Lane.
Stan Lane from the Midnight Express, that is serious wrestling royalty.
It really is. Stan Lane was everything a wrestler was supposed to be in that era. He was handsome, smooth in the ring, a fantastic talker, and just an all-around great worker.
But in early 1993, Stan Lane decides he wants to retire.
So suddenly, Jim Cornette has a massive problem on his hands. He has this top-tier tag team brand. He has Tom Prichard ready to go, but he has a glaring vacancy. He needs a replacement for a legend.
And replacing a beloved legend is arguably the hardest job in the entire business. It's like trying to replace the lead singer of an iconic rock band.
The fans are practically pre-programmed to hate the new guy just because he isn't the old guy.
So enter David Ferrier, the mechanic. But Cornette is smart. He doesn't call him David Ferrier. He doesn't call him Jimmy Richland. He calls him Jimmy Del Rey.
And this is where we see the psychology of booking at play. Why Del Rey? Because Stan Lane, the guy he's replacing, was famously billed as being from Delray Beach, Florida.
It's a subconscious bridge.
Exactly. By naming the new guy Jimmy Del Rey, they create this subtle, almost invisible link to the past member. It makes him feel like he inherently belongs in that lineage.
Oh, it's brilliant. But then Cornette executes the real masterstroke. He gives him the moniker. He christens him the Gigolo.
And this is where that physical paradox we talked about in the intro really becomes the focal point. Cornette looked at Jimmy and saw that he obviously wasn't a bodybuilder. He had that, as the source calls it, pudgy midsection.
So instead of giving him a t-shirt to hide it, they put a massive spotlight on it.
Right. If Jimmy Del Rey tries to act like a tough, intimidating bad guy, the fans are just going to laugh at him. But if he acts like this completely delusional Lothario, who genuinely believes he is God's gift to women.
And he does that jiggle dance to show off his completely average body.
It generates massive heat.
It makes the fans absolutely furious. They look at him and say, who does this guy think he is? I want to pay money to see someone punch him right in his smug mouth.
It is the crucial difference between what the industry calls go-away heat, where fans are just bored and want you to leave, and I'll pay to see you lose heat.
And he had the latter in spades.
Oh.
The jiggle dance became his absolute signature. He would stand dead center in the ring, swivel his hips, and just let his stomach bounce.
It was grotesque, it was hilarious, and it was incredibly effective for a villain.
And we have to talk about how well it contrasted with his partner, Tom Prichard. Prichard was billed as the Doctor of Desire. He was the serious, polished athlete, the straight man of the duo.
While Del Rey was the weird, sleazy, eccentric cousin, it was an absolutely perfect dynamic, and it brought them huge success. The records show they won the SMW Tag Team Championship on 3 separate occasions.
They were the undisputed anchors of that territory. But here is where the timeline gets really unique, and it brings us to Section 3, the big stage.
The World Wrestling Federation.
Usually, if you are the top act in a regional territory like SMW, you stay there. You don't just magically show up on national television for a rival company. But 1993 was a weird transitional year.
It really was. The WWF tag team division was a bit thin, and they were actively looking for fresh talent. Jim Cornette had managed to strike up a working relationship with Vince McMahon.
A rare cross-promotion deal.
So the Heavenly Bodies, a team actively reigning in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, make their debut on WWF Monday Night Raw.
The date is August 9th, 1993. This is a massive platform. Raw is the flagship show. Our sources note they debuted against a team of Bobby Hoo and Mike Bucci,
Which was a standard squash match designed entirely to showcase their moves to the national audience.
and the WWF clearly liked what they saw because they didn't waste any time pushing them up the card. Later that exact same month, August 30th, they are on SummerSlam.
SummerSlam, one of the big four pay-per-views. And look at who they are put in the ring against.
The Steiner Brothers, Rick and Scott Steiner.
For the World Tag Team Championship. Now, we have to emphasize, at this point in time, the Steiners are arguably the best, most dangerous tag team on the planet.
They were terrifying. They were known for working incredibly stiff. They would throw these massive high-angle suplexes that could legitimately knock the wind out of you or drop you on your head if you weren't perfectly positioned.
So for the WWF management to put the Heavenly Bodies in a championship match against the Steiners on a live pay-per-view, it speaks volumes about how much they trusted Jimmy Del Rey's in-ring ability.
They needed someone who could take those insane bumps, position themselves perfectly to take a Frankensteiner safely, and make the champions look like absolute monsters.
And Del Rey was the perfect mechanic for the job. Even though the Heavenly Bodies lost that match, just being trusted with that spot elevated them instantly. It made them legitimate in the eyes of the WWF fans.
And they kept that momentum rolling. Which leads us to a specific match at Survivor Series 1993 that I think really represents the absolute peak of their heel character work.
November 24th, 1993. Inside the legendary Boston Garden, the Heavenly Bodies versus the Rock and Roll Express.
Now, context is everything here. The Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, they were the bitter arch-rivals of the Heavenly Bodies down in SMW. They were the ultimate pure baby faces, former teen idols.
And here they are, both teams, wrestling on a major WWF pay-per-view event. But the most mind-blowing part is what they were actually fighting for.
Right. They were fighting for the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Championship.
On WWF television.
That is just unheard of. The WWF willingly gave up premium airtime on one of their biggest shows of the year to promote a title belt from a small regional promotion in Tennessee.
It's something that would be almost unimaginable today. It shows the immense respect the industry had for Cornette and the in-ring quality of these two teams.
And the finish of that match, it is pure classic wrestling psychology. Walk us through it.
So the match is reaching its climax. The Rock and Roll Express are on absolute fire. The Boston crowd is going wild. They clearly have the match won. But, as always happens in these situations, the referee gets distracted.
The oldest trick in the bad guy playbook.
Exactly. And while the referee has his back turned to the action, Jimmy Del Rey grabs Jim Cornette's tennis racket.
The tennis racket. We haven't even properly highlighted the racket yet. Cornette carried this vintage tennis racket to the ring for every single match.
And the running storyline was that the cover of the racket was loaded with a heavy steel horseshoe. So Del Rey takes this loaded racket and just smashes Robert Gibson with it.
Prichard scrambles over, makes the cover. The referee turns back around. 1, 2, 3.
The bad guys win.
On a massive global stage, they used the cheapest tactics possible to steal the titles from the heroes. It perfectly established them as the smartest, sneakiest team in the building.
And they rode that wave of heat right into 1994. The sources show they made it to WrestleMania X.
Madison Square Garden, the 10th anniversary of WrestleMania, they wrestled a dark match against the Bushwhackers.
Now, a dark match is just for the live crowd in the arena. It's not broadcast on the pay-per-view. But they won that match. And honestly, just being able to say you won a match at WrestleMania inside MSG, that is a permanent resume builder.
Absolutely. And they stayed highly relevant throughout the year. At Survivor Series 1994, they were recruited for a major main event level storyline. They became part of Ted DiBiase's $1 million team.
Look at the sheer size of the guys on this team.
Yeah.
You have Bam Bam Bigelow. You have King Kong Bundy. You have Tatanka. These are massive hulking monsters.
And then standing next to them, the Heavenly Bodies. the Gigolo and the Doctor.
But there's a very practical reason for that. In a long, traditional Survivor Series elimination match, you need workers. You need guys who can actually wrestle back and forth for 20 minutes while guys like King Kong Bundy stand on the apron and catch their breath.
They were the engine of the team. They were up against a team called Guts and Glory, which was Lex Luger, Mabel, Atom Bomb, and the Smoking Guns.
And the $1 Million Team actually won that match. Del Rey and Prichard were eventually eliminated during the course of it, but they were integral parts of the winning unit.
But as we flip the calendar to 1995, you can start to see the writing on the wall. The cross-promotion deal is fading out. Smoky Mountain Wrestling is struggling financially.
The great run starts to wind down. In January 1995, Del Rey is an entrant in the 30-man Royal Rumble match. He gets in there, lasts a little while, and is eventually eliminated by the British Bulldog.
Pretty standard Rumble appearance, but his exit from the WWF is what I find truly fascinating, mostly because of who he was in the ring with on his way out the door.
This is what the industry calls the jobber to the stars phase of a career. When a wrestler is leaving, or when the front office knows they are incredibly safe and reliable, they will put them in matches with their absolute top stars to guarantee a great television segment.
So in April 1995, on the show Superstars, he wrestles Bret the Hitman Hart.
The excellence of execution, the face of the company.
And then his final televised match for the WWF is on Raw, July 24th, 1995, and he wrestles Shawn Michaels.
The Heartbreak Kid, the Intercontinental Champion at the time.
Just think about the magnitude of that. In his final months, he shared the ring with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Those are undeniably the two best wrestlers of the 1990s.
And the office trusted Jimmy Del Rey to go out there on national television and work singles matches with him. That is the ultimate seal of approval for a wrestler's ability.
So by mid-95, the WWF run is officially over. And then SMW finally shuts its doors for good in December of 1995. The old territory system is effectively dead.
So where does a traditional guy like Jimmy Del Rey go? He's a gigolo who relies on an obnoxious dance and a manager with a tennis racket.
Section 4. The Wild West. He goes to the one place that makes absolutely zero sense on paper. He goes to Philadelphia. Extreme Championship Wrestling.
I really cannot stress enough how weird of a cultural fit this was. ECW in 1995 was grunge. It was counterculture. It was flannel shirts, broken tables, blood, and beer.
The ECW fans actively despised sports entertainment. They hated traditional gimmicks.
And here come the Heavenly Bodies. Two guys walking down the aisle in pristine matching trunks, managed by a loudmouth Southern lawyer doing a jiggle dance.
They were the ultimate squares crashing the punk rock show. And paradoxically, that is exactly why it worked. They ended up joining a faction called Raven's Nest.
Which is another layer of weirdness. Raven was this moody, depressed, philosophical cult leader. Why on earth would he hang out with the Gigolo?
It had to be irony, right?
Completely. Raven collected the outcasts and the weirdos of wrestling. And bringing these pristine Southern traditionalists into his gritty nest was a brilliant way to troll the diehard ECW audience.
And this leads to a specific night in ECW history that our source highlights in detail. December 9th, 1995. An event called December to Dismember.
The match was billed as Ultimate Jeopardy. And this is where we see peak ECW booking insanity. I really need you to brace yourself as we go through these match stipulations.
I'm ready. Lay the stipulations on me.
Okay, so it's a tag team match. The Heavenly Bodies versus the Public Enemy. Now, Public Enemy were the beloved crowd favorites. They wore street clothes, they brought tables into the ring, they were brawlers.
So once again, we have the pristine technicians versus the chaotic brawlers.
Exactly. But the stakes placed on this match were just completely ridiculous. Stipulation number 1. If Public Enemy loses the match, they are forced to fight each other later that same night.
Okay, forcing the best friends to turn on each other. Classic wrestling tension. I follow that.
Stipulation number 2. If the Heavenly Bodies lose, their stablemates, a tag team called the Eliminators, are fired from ECW. And on top of that, their manager, a guy named Jason, has to get his head shaved bald.
Wait, hold on. So if Jimmy Del Rey gets pinned in the ring, 2 completely different guys lose their jobs and a third guy loses his hair.
You've got it. But wait, there is more. Stipulation 3. If the Heavenly Bodies lose, Raven's valet, Beulah McGillicuddy, is forced to spend an entire week with her rival, Tommy Dreamer.
The romantic soap opera subplot? So now true love is on the line too?
And finally, stipulation 4. If the Heavenly Bodies lose, Stevie Richards, who was Raven's lackey, gets locked inside a steel cage for 5 minutes with the winners of the main event.
That is, I mean, that is just so much math. I feel like the fans in the arena would need a spreadsheet just to keep track of what was at stake.
It was absolute chaos by design.
Mm-mm.
And the ultimate punchline to all of this build-up, the Heavenly Bodies lost the match.
Of course they did.
So every single one of those crazy stipulations was enforced. The Eliminators were fired. Jason got his head shaved in the middle of the ring. Beulah had to leave with Dreamer. And poor Stevie Richards got locked in a steel cage and absolutely destroyed.
And amidst all that swirling chaos and storyline madness, there is Jimmy Del Rey just lacing up his boots and doing his job perfectly.
Just doing his job. But that ECW run was very short. It was basically a cup of coffee. Tom Prichard ended up going back to the WWF to work as a trainer. So the Heavenly Bodies disbanded.
The source mentions Del Rey had one final singles match there against Bubba Ray Dudley, who obviously became a massive tag team legend later on, and Del Rey lost that match. And that was it for Philadelphia.
So he's conquered the old territories. He's wrestled on pay-per-view for the polished WWF. He's survived the hardcore bingo hall of ECW. There was only one major player left on the board in the Monday Night Wars.
Which brings us to Section 5, Reinvention. It's late 1996, World Championship Wrestling.
WCW is flush with cash. They are buying up every talent they can find. Hulk Hogan is there. The NWO is running wild. And in walks our guy, David Ferrier.
But he's not Jimmy Del Rey anymore.
No, he reinvents his identity yet again. He debuts in October 1996 under the name Jimmy Graffiti.
Jimmy Graffiti.
It is a painfully 90s name. It sounds like a radical character they invented for a skateboard or a soda commercial.
It really does. But the name itself matters a lot less than where WCW actually placed him on the roster. He wasn't wrestling the giant heavyweight.
No, he was placed directly into the cruiserweight division.
And this is huge context for our listeners. The WCW Cruiserweight division completely changed the paradigm of professional wrestling in North America. This is the division that featured Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero.
These were international athletes doing things in the ring that seemed to literally defy gravity.
And WCW management looked at Jimmy Graffiti, the guy with the pudgy midsection, the guy famous for the jiggle dance, and put him right in the mix with the greatest high flyers on earth.
Just visualize that contrast.
Yeah.
You have Rey Mysterio, who is maybe 5'4", wearing a colorful lucha libre mask, doing twisting flips off the top rope, and the guy catching him is Jimmy Graffiti.
It totally validated the entire premise of his career. He was a genuine elite athlete. The source specifically notes he competed against technical wizards like Dean Malenko and Billy Kidman.
And you simply cannot fake your way through a match with Dean Malenko. They called him the man of 1,000 holds. If you don't know exactly what you're doing on the mat, Malenko will tie you in knots. The fact that Del Rey hung with him proves his skill.
He became a solid part of the WCW landscape. He even participated in the massive World War III pay-per-view event in November 1996.
60 men, 3 separate wrestling rings, a massive chaotic spectacle, and he was right there in the thick of it.
But sadly, this WCW run, it ends incredibly abruptly. And it's not because he got fired. It's not because of backstage politics or scandal.
But it's the ultimate wrestler's curse. His body finally gave out. The source notes that he suffered a severe knee injury in 1997.
It's always the knees or the necks in that business.
It forced him to retire from full-time active competition. And here is the real kicker of this whole timeline. David Ferrier was born in 1962. So when he was forced to retire in 1997, he was only 35 years old.
35. That is just incredibly young, especially for a guy with his vast technical knowledge. If his knee hadn't given out, a worker like him could have easily wrestled for another 10 or 15 years.
It's one of the great tragedies of the profession. The miles just add up so fast on those joints.
So what does a 35-year-old retired wrestler do with his life? He can't do the jiggle dance forever. And that brings us to Section 6, Life After Wrestling.
Well, initially he did what many respected veterans do. He decided to pass on his knowledge to the next generation. He became an instructor.
Which makes perfect sense. If you are known as a worker who knows how to make every single opponent look good, you are the ideal teacher.
Our records show he went to work as an instructor at Steve Kern's professional wrestling school down in Florida.
Steve Kern. Wait, that's Skinner. The exact guy who beat him in his WWF tryout match way back in 1991.
It is the ultimate circle of life in the wrestling business. He went back to work side by side with the guy who first welcomed him to the big leagues.
The source says he trained guys like Buck Quartermain and Steve Madison, names that hardcore independent wrestling fans would definitely recognize. He even managed an indie team called the new heavenly bodies.
Keeping the old gimmick alive for a new crowd.
But eventually, he made a clean break. He left the wrestling bubble entirely.
And this is the part of his story that I actually find really grounding and respectable. Because so often we hear these tragic stories that end with retired guys just hanging around the fringes of the business, signing autographs in sad high school gyms until they're 70 years old.
Right, unable to let go of the spotlight. But Jimmy Del Rey didn't do that.
No. He entered the trades. He started a completely legitimate, normal business. He founded a company called Ferrier's Fine Flooring, Inc. in Tampa, Florida in March 2006.
Hardwood floors, tile, grout, real tangible work.
Real work. He traded the roar of the crowd for a steady job and a normal life. The source even mentions he started a second entity, Ferrier's Flooring, Inc., later in September 2013. He successfully built a second life for himself.
It really humanizes him. He wasn't just the gigolo. He was David Ferrier, a small business owner in Florida.
But unfortunately, we do have to discuss the end of his story.
And it ends far too soon.
It does. On December 6, 2014, David Ferrier passed away.
The details provided in the source are just tragic.
He suffered a massive heart attack while he was driving his truck on U.S. Highway 301 near the Florida State Fairground.
While driving, that is a terrifying thought.
He was rushed to Tampa General Hospital, but they couldn't save him. He died at the age of 52.
52. We see that age, or ages close to it, so incredibly often with wrestlers from that specific 80s and 90s era. The long-term toll that lifestyle takes on the human heart is just immense.
It really is. But I think it's worth noting that the WWE, this massive billion-dollar global corporation that he hadn't worked for in nearly 20 years, they actually issued an official statement offering condolences a couple of days later. They remembered him.
They remembered the work. And that is exactly what I want to focus on as we move to wrap this up. Section 7, the trophy case. Because it's so easy to just joke about the sleazy dance and the pudgy stomach, but this guy was a highly decorated, legitimate champion.
Let's look at the roll call of his accomplishments. It's an impressive list.
Hit me with the list. Let's cement his legacy.
Okay, in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, he was a 3-time tag team champion, and he also held their Beat the Champ television title.
Check.
In the USWA, World Tag Team Champion. Back in Florida Championship Wrestling, Tag Team Champion.
Check.
And his international resume. He was the Wing World Junior Heavyweight Champion and the AWA World Light Heavyweight Champion over in FMW.
So he was legitimately a world champion in Japan. Twice.
And on the independent circuit, he held a PWF Junior Heavyweight title 3 times, the FCW Light Heavyweight title, the IWA Mid-South Light Heavyweight title. The list just goes on.
And didn't Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which is basically the Bible of wrestling magazines at the time, didn't they rank his team historically?
They did. In 2003, PWI released this massive, definitive list called the Best Tag Teams of the PWI Years. The Heavenly Bodies, specifically the Del Rey and Prichard version of the team, were ranked at number 73.
Number 73. Just think about how many thousands of tag teams have existed in the history of the sport. To be recognized in the top 100 is an elite, exclusive club.
It absolutely cements their legacy.
Yeah.
They weren't just a mid-card comedy act with a loaded tennis racket. They were objectively one of the best wrestling teams of their generation.
So as we synthesize all of this information from the records, what is the big takeaway here? When we look at the complete file of Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey, what do we see?
I see a bridge.
A bridge?
Well, he was a bridge between 2 completely different eras of the industry. On one hand, he had the old-school, carny sensibilities of the territory days. He knew exactly how to make a crowd furious just by looking at them or shaking his hips. He knew the psychology of using a prop like a tennis racket perfectly. That is the old school.
But the actual wrestling?
The wrestling was entirely new school. The flawless moonsaults, the intense speed, the complex technical counters. He was doing things in 1993 that wouldn't become the industry standard until 2003. He lived in both of those worlds simultaneously.
And he did it all while shaking his hips.
While shaking his hips.
I have a provocative thought to leave you with, listener. We look at professional wrestling today. The modern athletes are undeniably incredible. Everyone on television has an 8-pack. They're essentially gymnasts and acrobats. But is the product missing something?
Are you asking if it's missing the gigolo?
Exactly. Could a character like Jimmy Del Rey even exist in today's landscape? Could a guy with a totally average dad bod go on national television, call himself a gigolo, and actually get real heat? Or would the modern audience just reject him outright because he doesn't look like an action figure?
That is the big question. Have we become so visually obsessed with the look that we've lost the nuanced art of the character worker? I don't know the answer. But I do think there is something lost when every single person on the roster looks like a fitness model.
There is a unique charm to the unlikely agile athlete. The guy who looks like us but moves like a superhero.
It gives you hope.
It really does. So here is my homework for you. If you have a moment after this deep dive, go online. Search for Heavenly Bodies versus Rock and Roll Express Survivor Series 1993.
Pay attention to the finish.
Watch the finish. Watch the jiggle dance. But mostly, just watch the work. You will see a master technician who knew exactly who he was and exactly how to make you react.
You definitely won't regret watching it.
That is it for this deep dive into the life of Jimmy Del Rey. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.